Well, good afternoon, everyone. AFR is back. Another edition of After Further Review. Jay Smith is here, and we've got another quarantine episode for you. Coronavirus still going around, so we're all still stuck at home, but the NFL draft is tonight. Something to look forward to, football related. And we have the AFR draft guru, Jackson Wright. He is back now, I think, for the fourth year to do a draft show with us. Super excited about that. Jackson, thanks for spending some time with us going over the draft today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. I always look forward to these shows. I know it's a little bit unconventional. I want to say last year you joined us at the WCCP studios when we were at 105.5 The Roar, and then obviously at Tiger Vision those 2 years prior to that. But we're doing it through the through the phones. We're all quarantined at home. You're still up in Uptown Charlotte, correct?
Yes, I am trying to manage all on my own.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the bachelor life probably isn't so bad. And you've been working from home now for what now? This is your third or fourth week?
Sixth.
Oh, sixth.
Yep.
Wow. So you've been doing this since the beginning of March.
Yeah, practically. I think we got ours was I
Wow.
think March 12th or 13th.
Goodness. And so have they announced, has your company announced when y'all will go back to work in the office, or is that just kind of still not decided?
Right now it's May 15th, but they keep pushing it back 1 or 2 weeks at a time, it seems like. Right now they're limiting all of our
Goodness.
travel because we do a lot of travel till I think the end of June. So pretty
Mm-hmm.
much very
Mm-hmm.
limited as far as when we'll be able to get back in the office or do anything.
Well, hopefully everything kind of goes back to normal. I think a lot of people are expecting within the next month or so for things to hopefully iron out, and we're hoping that obviously the curve and everything continues to flatten. But let's go ahead and switch over to some football news. And the draft is going on as scheduled tonight. It'll be out of the Bristol studios up there at ESPN in Connecticut, and we were actually talking before we came on air. Roger Goodell, you had mentioned he's doing the show from his basement, but there's actually a couple ESPN personalities, most notably, I guess, Todd McShay, who announced that he's recovering from the coronavirus. That they will not be covering the draft this year, so it might look and feel a little bit different. But if you just go down the pecking order, what do you expect to see from those first few picks in the draft? And you got the Bengals at one, Washington's at two. Like where do you what's I guess of those first 4 to 5 picks, which one do you feel like could be a surprise?
I think there's going to be a lot of surprises. I think this year is a year that I think most teams are going to try to draft guaranteed players. So players that they know are
Hmm.
first round grades that are guarantees because they missed a lot of that kind of that player recruitment and player evaluation time that they usually have. And so you will see a lot more trades this year, I think, than in years prior for teams moving up to get that guaranteed talent. So getting that guaranteed offensive tackle, wide receiver, or quarterback that they think will be able to change their franchise going forward. Um, so in my mock draft, I didn't assume a lot of those
Hmm.
trades. I assumed that a lot of them just did like a general assumption that every team is going to stay in their general spot. We're not going to see a lot of trades. But I think, especially for the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and offensive tackles, I think you'll see some trades in the first 15, 20 picks that will be moving around a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you've got most notably amongst quarterbacks, you got Burrow and Tagovailoa up there. I think most people expect the Bengals to go with Burrow. Um, but I mean, like even those teams that are down there in the 6 to 10 range. I mean, you have the Panthers at seven. They've lost a lot of pieces this past offseason. Kuechly was retired. Greg Olson's moved on. Obviously, Cam is no longer there. And I was actually talking to a couple other people about this the other with it when it comes to the Panthers specifically. They're sitting in the right. They're at seven. What do you feel like they need to do with that first draft pick? Do they need to go and get an offensive playmaker, or should they focus more on kind of shoring up the defense? Because they have a lot of guys now. I mean, Luke Kuechly was the heart and soul of that defense, and he's gone now.
I think the best move for the Panthers would be to trade back If you look at the defensive tackle and cornerback talent, there's not many in the like top 10 that you would spend a pick on, especially cornerback outside of Jeff Okuda. When it comes to the defensive tackle, Derek Brown is good, but I think Javon Kinlaw out of University of South Carolina is just as good, if not better. So I think trading back into the next 10 picks would be a lot better decision for them. Get some extra draft picks, be able to do a little bit more with their picks this year. Because if you look at, they only have 7 picks this year, one for each round, and
Hmm.
in my opinion, they have a
Yep.
lot of glaring needs as far as what they need, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I actually wanted to bring up was obviously they have a lot of holes on defense. I mean they lost a lot of their sack leaders, a lot of those guys on the defensive line. You admit with linebacker, and now that Kuechly is gone, and this is just my opinion here, I feel like he was that heart and soul of the Panthers defense. Do you feel like the Panthers, if the stars align, and there's a lot obviously in flux on draft day, but do you think maybe there's a chance that they would pick up or consider Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson, who is kind of that one-man band linebacker, who might really benefit?
In my opinion, Isaiah Simmons is a better suit for an outside linebacker than an inside linebacker. And where the Panthers really need right now is the inside linebacker.
Hmm.
There's not many in the top 10. There's no talent in the top 10 that I would take at linebacker. So pretty much, unless they trade back and maybe get Patrick Queen or Murray out of Oklahoma, there's
Hmm.
not much talent there for linebacker.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma would also be a good pick for the Panthers. I don't know. Again, you mentioned they only have those 7 picks this draft, um, and I feel like right now they have more issues, more holes on that defensive side of the ball, not just up front on the line, but also in the secondary. And I know that they were able to re-sign Trey Boston this offseason, and I think they're adding Justin Burris. But look, they still have some issues in the secondary. And now that you've got Drew Brees for the Saints and you've got Tom Brady at the Buccaneers, you've got to think that the Panthers need to plan for some deep balls facing their secondary this season.
Yeah, I think a cornerback is definitely a high priority for them. It's just unfortunately there's not many in the top. There's no talent that you would take in the top 10
Right.
outside Jeff Okuda, and I don't see the Panthers trading up to
Hmm.
get Jeff Okuda. That'd be a ridiculously dumb decision.
Well, there's always at least a handful of picks, especially early on in the draft, that are head scratchers. As you go down the pecking order, uh, the Browns, they've got a top 10 pick. If you're the Browns, who are you going for here?
I think the biggest need they need is left tackle. If you remember, their left tackle
Okay.
got arrested for trying to move a little bit of marijuana across the Mexican border. It's just a small amount.
Yeah.
But so they're in a need for a left tackle. I think Jedrick Wills Jr. out of Bama makes the most sense for them at that pick, regardless of who's
Hmm.
available, because Jedrick Wills is the most ready, I think, to start day one. I think Tristan Wirfs and Mekhi Becton have higher ceilings, but if you're looking for offensive tackle to start right now, which I think the
Hmm.
Browns are more looking for than anything else, you
Right.
want to take Jedrick Wills.
Yeah, I would agree. And then again, as you move down, you've got the Bucks who have a pick at 14. Atlanta's got that pick at 16. So I guess a lot will be talked about in relation to Tom Brady and Gronkowski now at the Buccaneers, and obviously Drew Brees is a staple in New Orleans. What do you think Atlanta is sitting right there, smack dab in the middle of the first round? What's their major need? And how they can kind of counteract the move with Brady going to the Bucks.
Well, I think pretty much everyone has the Falcons as one of the top teams to move up. A lot of them have them switching spots with the Jaguars or maybe the Cardinals. I don't think the Panthers will trade
Hmm.
with them, but I think one of those two teams is probably good for that. I think they'll probably try to move up and get Isaiah Simmons or a defensive player because I think their head coach barely saved his job last year, and he's not a defensive guy.
Hmm.
And their defense was not good last year. There was no excuse for their defense. Granted, they had a lot of injuries, but they just weren't able to get to the quarterback. And with You could say the Panthers have Teddy Bridgewater, which is, I think, it's obviously better than what we had last year. And
Right.
then you got Tom Brady and you got Drew Brees. You got to be able to get to the quarterback. And I think Isaiah Simmons is probably the top edge rusher outside of Chase Young. You have some other ones
Yes.
that you could take maybe
Yes.
later on, but I think
Hmm.
those would be reaches at 16.
Yeah. I see your point there. I just again, I feel like right now the NFC South uh, should be fairly competitive, fairly stacked going into this fall. But let's transition a little bit now and talk about some of the Clemson players who are looking to get drafted here this tonight. Clemson obviously has had a lot of success recently. They've had at least five selections in five of the last six drafts, which only Alabama and Ohio State are the only other programs in the nation to have that streak. Um, I guess it wouldn't be surprising to see that extended for Clemson this coming week here and have six of the last seven drafts with at least five selections. I mean, there's so much talent coming out of Clemson.
Well, you got to start off with Isaiah Simmons. Mel Kiper and
Hmm.
Todd McShay both have him going at number 4 to the Giants, but I think they are forgetting that Dave Gettleman is a crazy man. No one understands why he drafts them or like who he drafts, and he leaves it to the very last second. I'm not going to support any pod, but on another podcast, they were talking to Brandon Beane, who's the new GM of the Bills, who used to be at the Panthers when Dave Gettleman was
Right.
there, and he said no one would know what he was picking until the very last day. It seemed like, and he held his cards like super close to
Hmm.
his chest all the time, so you never knew what he was going to get. And Tristan Wirfs has come out saying recently that he thought his interviews with the Giants went the best, and that like most teams only had like 2 or 3 meetings with him. And Tristan Wirfs, I think, said he had
Hmm.
like 4 or 5 with him. So I feel like that would be the wild card pick for the Giants. I think in the top 5 picks, that people look at him like, why would you do that there? Like he's good, but he's not top 5 talent. Because the Giants are always going to be that team that you kind of look at and you're just
And absolutely,
what are you
because we
smoking?
we mentioned a little bit earlier, there's always a handful of picks in the first round that are just head scratchers that you just are like, what is what are you thinking there? And maybe it's the pressure of the moment, maybe it's just a dumb decision. I mean, we've seen a lot over the years. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Isaiah Simmons is probably the most discussed Clemson player in this draft. I think everybody is expecting him to go in the first round. Um, AJ Terrell though is a guy that at cornerback is I think a little bit overlooked.
Yeah, I think he's very good. I think he's a late first, early second. I think the national championship game definitely hurt his stock of how bad he got beat by Jamar
Yes,
Chase. I think,
yes.
obviously that wasn't his best game. I think if he looks back on it, he would even agree with that. Um, but I do think he's a good talent. I think there is a chance that he could go to the Raiders somewhat early in the first round because, the Raiders love their Clemson players for some reason.
Hmm.
And so I think he could go there. He also has a couple chances later in the first with maybe the Vikings or the Dolphins. And if not, I don't think he goes very far on day 2. I think he gets picked up by either the Rams, maybe the Panthers, or the Jaguars.
Yeah, I see all those situations. I think the Raiders certainly one that sticks out to me. And again, you mentioned that too. It seems like the Raiders have a particular affinity for Clemson players, kind of similar to what we saw with the Buffalo Bills several years ago. What about guys like T. Higgins though? I mean, look, he's 6'4". He's got great ball skills. We've seen all the immaculate catches that he's had over the years. And the pedigree of receivers that have come out of Clemson. So do you feel like T. Higgins is a guy that could go first or second round? More likely round two, but somewhere in that range?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate description for him. I think, a lot of people are very kind of like just on one side or the other. They either think he'll be, mid to late first, or they think he'll be late second. I think there is a strong chance that he'll go late first to either the Packers, the Eagles, or the Vikings, because I think all of them are in need for a wide receiver. Obviously, I think Ruggs,
Right.
Judy, and um, CD Lamb will definitely go high. I think I have them in the low teens right now. But
I think
Hmm.
T. Higgins is a very good fourth. Some people have Denzel Mims and some other guys that are up there with him, or maybe even above him. But I think he's probably the fourth best receiver in this draft.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. And then you also have guys, just again, I'm going down Clemson's pecking order. You've got Kayvon Wallace, safety. You got John Simpson on the O line, Tanner Muse, and then Tremaine Antrim at offensive tackle. But I think again the headliners for Clemson this draft are definitely going to be Simmons, Terrell, Higgins, and then maybe Kayvon Wallace. I think he has the potential to land maybe third round, possibly fourth round. He's a little small, but he was very consistent while at Clemson.
Yeah. I think if you look at the Clemson players in this draft, I think you have four guarantees to get drafted. I think the fourth one is John Simpson.
Hmm.
He is probably one of the more athletic interior offensive linemen you're going to find, especially in his like his arm span and being able to move around very quickly. I think he is a very underrated interior
Hmm.
offensive lineman. I have him going probably late day 2 or early day 3. Kayvon Wallace and Tanner Muse, I
Hmm.
think still will probably get drafted. I think there's a chance one of them might not be because you never know how like the late rounds go.
Hmm.
Usually, a lot of teams they like to take chances on smaller school guys with those like day 3 draft picks. Try to get someone that might be kind of hit like a hidden gem. So one of them
Yep.
might be overlooked and probably still make a team out of being like undrafted. But I think both of them should still probably get drafted though. And then when you're looking at
Yeah.
the other
I, I,
guys,
I would.
I think Tremaine Ankrum, Gage
Hmm.
Cervenka, DeAndre Overton, and Denzel Washington should probably all make it should all probably get camp invites. I think DeAndre Overton probably stands the best
Yeah.
chance to make a team though out of those guys, just because I think he was just
Yep.
so far like down on the depth chart. I think he was very hidden. I think a lot of times in his 4 years with us.
Well, he was a hidden gem really because I mean he was reliable when he came into the game, but you're right, there were so many other five-star guys that were ahead of him. And that's not to take anything away from Overton's contributions while he was at Clemson. It's just a statement to how deep that wide receiver roster was while he was
Yeah,
there.
I think his main
Um,
knock that you can
you
have
know,
on him is probably the same thing everyone had on Travion Thompson was he was a little bit slow as far as his top end speed,
hmm.
which is why I think he got pushed down
Hmm.
by Justin Ross and T Higgins because they had those higher end speed, were able to do the vertical routes a lot easier than DeAndre.
So I guess now, we've talked a little about some of the specific teams. We've gone over what the Panthers are looking for, what some other teams are looking for, and touched on the players from Clemson that are likely to be drafted. I want to get an opinion from you here. Who do you feel like is going to have the best draft? Who's going to knock it out of the park out of these 32 teams and have the best draft 2020?
The Dolphins obviously stand the best chance to have the best draft just because of the
Hmm.
number of number one like first round draft picks they have. The big decision though for them is do they take the risk on Tua Tagovailoa? I think they should. I
Mm.
think they should learn from their mistakes of what they did with Drew Brees, and I think a lot of their fans of the franchise have just been writing on that and just telling them like, you guys had a chance to sign Drew Brees, you had him signed, but you failed him because of a dumb physical that he should have passed otherwise. And so
Hmm.
I think if you're them, you cannot risk that again. I think you have to draft Tua Tagovailoa. Um,
Even with the history of
I think
injuries
you should,
that
yeah.
you've
I still would.
because I mean if that comes I mean again obviously I would never want this to happen, you never wish injuries on anybody, but if he comes out and he gets sidelined week 2 or week 3, it all just blew up in your face. I mean now maybe you do salvage something with those other 2 picks because I believe they have 3 picks in the first round alone. They've got it at their first one is what 5, then they go down at
18.
18, and then they have another one at 26. So a little spread out, but still 3 picks in the first round. So you're right, they definitely have the most, I guess, the best opportunity to have the best draft. Um, But I guess to flip it, who do you feel like could have the worst draft?
Um, Probably the Giants because the Giants are dumb. And then the other one that would probably have a bad draft, I think, is probably the Cowboys. Because a lot of people are saying the Cowboys
Mm,
should maybe draft like a quarterback, which I think would be dumb, considering you still have Dak Prescott.
hmm
And then I think they have some glaring needs, especially on the defensive side. And then there were some reports that came out today that Jerry Jones is drafting on his own, which is a terrible
Oh.
nightmare scenario if you're a Cowboys fan, because it's very well known that Jerry
Yep.
Jones, back a couple years ago, was like dead set on drafting Johnny Manziel, but his son pretty much fought him and like pretty much took away that idea and forced him to draft Zach Martin, which we know is like a 5-time All-Pro now, the best like interior offensive lineman
hmm
in the NFL probably by most people, and like obviously that's helped save him because I feel like if the Cowboys had Johnny Manziel, that probably wouldn't be great. So I would say the Cowboys probably would be the team that would go for flash. So they would probably draft someone way earlier than what they needed to be,
hmm
and so
Yeah.
I think the Cowboys would be a very interesting pick to watch because either they go stay very safe and just do a cornerback or a defensive lineman to kind of help out that defensive side of the ball, or they just do something
Right.
absolutely crazy.
Well, it's the
Yeah,
Cowboys, so you gotta expect that at least a
it's
couple
the
of those
wow
picks are going to
factor.
be off the wall. What? Oh, of course, because it's the Cowboys. One thing I do want to pick your brain on here. What do you think now? I mean, for the first time in what feels like forever, the Patriots are they're without Tom Brady. So what do you think Belichick's plan is going to be for this draft class? Do you think his do you think he has been anticipating Brady leaving for a couple of years and has had a plan in place? Like, how do you think the Patriots are going to go about this draft? Is it going to be business as usual, or are they going to try something different here?
I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Tua first. If Tua starts falling, like some people say
Mm,
he will, I think the Patriots will probably be the like most prepared to move up for him because they have a lot of draft picks this year, a lot of draft picks next year, from Brady leaving, Gronk moving, and a lot of other moving parts. So I think they stand the best chance of being able that team to move up to maybe get Tua if he falls down. Also, I think they are an easy team. Like, if nothing's really looking too hot in the like early 20s, I think they might shift back and just
yeah,
force everything to next year. Because maybe try to get Trevor Lawrence or another one of the
yeah.
quarterbacks next year. Because if you look at the teams that are just going to be bad this year and going to be bad again next year, like the Redskins, the Bengals, the Giants, all of them
hmm
would have drafted a quarterback in the last 3 years. So none of them are going to be just saying we give up already. We took them the first 5 picks 2 or 3 years ago, but we give up already. So they're not going to give up on a quarterback that easy. So I think one of
Right.
those teams will probably move back and allow the Patriots to take that number one pick and get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I would agree with that with your opinion about who you have with Miami possibly having the best draft, at least the potential. And then I think who did you went with the what was your worst team? It's blanking on me
Cowboys and the
now.
Giants.
Oh, the Cowboys and Giants. Yeah, not a fan of the Giants front office, it seems.
Well, I don't think he uses a computer that much. He says he does, but I don't know about that. And I'm just like so tired of his draft classes, like Vernon Butler with the Panthers, drafting a defensive tackle when
hmm
you had three on the roster that were going to be starters for any other team is absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there's so much that, and I don't even really fully understand it as well as you do, all the different moving parts that go into the NFL draft and how all that works. And there's a lot of strategy, a ton of strategy and planning that goes into, figuring out where you're at in the pecking order, what kind of guys are going to be available when it gets to your turn, what kind of mobility you have, and it's fascinating. It's like a bunch of 4D chess going on, but with all that 4D chess, there's always a couple of teams out there that are playing checkers, and I think you hit it on the head pretty good with the Giants out there playing checkers. Everybody else is out there trying to play 4D chess.
Jay, I got a question for you. Who do you think is the
Oh,
most likely team to either mess up on their draft pick or do something wrong with the computer and send in the wrong or just like waste a bunch of time and not being able to send in their draft pick. Who do you think is the team that does that most likely?
Who's the team that picks the wrong player, or
Or
who's
just
the
like
team that
has like
just?
technical difficulties in the middle of the first round of the draft while everyone's watching?
Gosh, out of out of these teams, to be honest, I equate that kind of mishap with how well the front office is run. And as I'm looking on the board here, I would agree that New York, their front office is not great. Um, I'm gonna put the New York Jets. I'm gonna take the other New York team and I'm gonna say the Jets because nothing ever goes right for the Jets. Like all Cleveland Brown jokes aside, the Jets are a eternal dumpster fire. And I mean, even going back to the butt fumble so many years ago, um, it's one thing after another, and it's such a circus that I feel like if there's one team that's just going to have a complete mishap, it'd probably be the Jets. But I guess a good safe pick would be either mm, maybe the Jaguars. I don't know. That's that's tough. That's really tough. But I could see the Jets just collapsing in on
Yeah, I
themselves.
can definitely see the Jets. I have them as the team that drafts Henry Ruggs super early because I think they're like a dumb team. They'll draft a player versus off of speed versus like pure talent. So I
Hmm.
think they would be the team that drafts like Henry Ruggs a third with like CD Lamb and Jerry Jeudy still on the board. I think they're that type of franchise. I have a dark horse for a team I think that mess up, which is the Vikings. The
Okay.
Vikings take two picks
Mm.
within like it's the Vikings, then the Patriots, then the Saints, then the Vikings again.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be dumb
Yeah.
and send in their pick like a rat like a whole draft pick early, and then like mess up the entire system because they'll be like, oh, it's our draft pick again already. So let's just go ahead and send in another, or they'll forget about the second one because
Uh,
they're on the phone with the first guy, just like, hey, good job, you made it.
you've got to expect, and that's a really good point actually that you're bringing up, and it's something that we haven't even discussed. You've got to expect that with all of this being done remotely, the likelihood of a misstep is probably much higher than it's ever been. And it's a completely, it's an abnormality, really, this whole quarantining and having to do everything remotely. So yeah, it's really going to be interesting to watch. I honestly tonight will be watching just as much to see how it all runs as I will to be seeing where guys end up in the pecking order because there's so many things that can go wrong when you try to do something like this. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's gonna be very entertaining television because I got to be honest, man, it's been pretty rough these past 4 to 5 weeks with no sports, and I think people are just excited to tune into something.
Yeah, I could definitely see Jim Irsay getting drunk super late tonight, and then realizing that he doesn't have a first round draft pick, and then try to move up, like and do something crazy and try to get a first round draft pick. Is like what? We're not drafting, and then just move up and do something stupid.
Yeah, it's probably the closest that these pro teams are ever going to get to like a fantasy football where, people do have fantasy football draft parties and everybody gets together, but sometimes those are done remotely. And it's usually through a system that tries to make it as simple as possible. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting. I mean, it honestly is. It just with everything that's going on to try and get this draft hammered out is really going to be interesting to watch. But thanks, yeah, like I said, man, I really appreciate you taking the time joining us and talking over what your thoughts are for this coming draft.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, well, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up this edition of AFR. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. Just as a reminder, if you want to listen to the show, we're on Apple Podcast and Spotify. All you have to do is search After Further Review and subscribe or follow there. But you can also reach out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We are there at After Review Show. We will be posting this episode shortly. Again, thanks so much to Jackson Wright for tuning in. I'm Jay Smith, and this has been another edition of After Further Review. Thanks for listening.